So my parents are from Hong Kong. They immigrated to Toronto before I was born. I was born and raised in Toronto, and we mostly spoke English and Cantonese at home. Like my sister, my older sister, and I. And I had lived in China for 3 years when I was younger, so I was able to learn a bit of Mandarin there. But I would say the two languages are pretty different. The characters that you read are the same, but the way you pronounce them are completely different. For example, in Cantonese there are 9 tones, whereas in Mandarin there's only 4. So that is a huge difference in itself. And also in Cantonese there's a lot of slang, or not slang, it's abbreviations where words that aren't really words are used a lot. But in Mandarin that doesn't really exist. And I think there are some times when you can hear similarities between Cantonese and Mandarin. For example, in Mandarin, "me" is "wo," and then in Cantonese it's "o." So it sounds kind of the same, but there is a difference. A lot of people say that Cantonese and Vietnamese sound pretty similar, but I don't understand any Vietnamese at all. I think the tones is what makes those two languages sound similar to people that might not speak it. And I think in learning Mandarin specifically, if you are an American being called to speak Mandarin, I think first getting down the basics is really crucial. First off, it's the phonetics, the pinyin is what we call it. Not the writing characters, but it's like the written pronunciations of the words. That will be like the foundation of everything you build on top of the Mandarin language. Because once you're able to get those phonetics down, and the reading and the pronunciation of those tones and those characters, or not the characters, the phonetics down, once you have that down, as you learn the gospel, or as you read from Preach My Gospel in the pinyin, it will help that much better, because you'll be able to excel in a much faster pace, compared to if you were still trying to work on those basics like all throughout your mission. Because I know there are some that really get anxious in learning characters or the more advanced stuff in the language, but once that happens, the foundation isn't built as quick or as solid, so then everything else that's built on top of it isn't going to be as firm or like solid, if that makes sense. And I think just speaking the language with your companion, or just whoever you see, is really important. I think when I was with a companion that was, I think I had a companion that was American. He was from Utah, and he was called Mandarin speaking, and I was his companion for 3 months. And I definitely wish that I had taken the time to speak the language with him more, and I wish I would have been more patient with him, because when you do have a companion, I think you should fully utilize him or her, because just speaking it makes that much more of a difference. And not being afraid to make mistakes is also really crucial. The more mistakes you make, the better it is, because you'll be able to learn from your mistakes, and also just learn not to make those mistakes in the future. And even if you do, it's always a learning process. Like, even though I'm Chinese, my Mandarin is nowhere near perfect, and I'm still trying to learn it and get better at it. So just knowing that there's always room for improvement, but just don't get too hard on yourself, because sometimes you might feel like, oh, like there's all these tones I have to learn, there's all these characters that I could learn, but I don't know any of it yet, or like everyone's laughing at me like when I'm making a mistake. But I think something that's important in the Chinese culture is Chinese people think it's like cool or like cute when you like make a mistake, especially if you're an elder. When you make a mistake, Chinese people, when they laugh, they're not laughing at you, but they're basically like liking you more, if that makes sense, because they see that you're willing to try and willing to put yourself out there to improve. And that's something that when the members do see, that will basically help a lot. And for Cantonese, I think it's pretty similar in learning it because they are both Chinese languages or Chinese dialects, but just the tones may be a bit different. And for sure with Cantonese, speaking it with someone that does speak Cantonese already will help a lot because of all those slang terms or abbreviations that I talked about. I'll say like I'm a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. In Mandarin, you say it, 我是耶稣基督后期圣徒教会的传教士. That's Mandarin. And then in Cantonese, you would say 我係耶穌基督後期聖徒教會嘅傳教士. So you might be able to pick out some similarities, like Jesus Christ in Mandarin is 耶稣基督, and then in Cantonese it's 耶稣基督. Yeah, so there are some similarities for sure, but a ton of differences as well. But the characters that you do read from are the same.